The principles of truth are seven. He who knows these, understandingly, possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Hermetic Philosophy is based on 7 principles. Those of you who have studied the occult before may have your ears perk at the number 7, a number we will surely get into at a later date as we talk about other occult practices. But for now, we will just stick to Hermeticism. As we proceed, every one of the 7 principles will be discussed in detail, but they often reference themselves, so we may as well run over them very quickly before we get too deep into the program. The 7 principles are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. All is mind. This is not to be confused with the New Age belief that outside one's mind reality does not exist, but rather that the all is spirit, which is to say that the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of the material universe, or matter and energy, or the phenomena of life, or what is apparent to our mental senses, all of this is spirit. Spirit is unknowable and undefinable, but said spirit may be considered a universal, infinite, living mind. All the phenomena of life, or the universe, is simply a mental creation of the all. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. The Hermetic student is warned to apply this mental law carefully, and not in a haphazard manner. With this master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. The old Hermetic masters wrote long ago, "He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." 2. The principle of correspondence. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. For example, the Fibonacci spiral, seen in a nautilus shell, a hurricane, and a spiral galaxy. There are planes of existence much beyond our knowing, but if we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on all planes of the mental, material, and spiritual universe. It is a universal law. The ancient masters considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man is able to pry aside the obstacles which hide from view the unknown. Just as the knowledge of the principles of geometry enables a man to measure distant suns and their movements, all while seated in his observatory, so does the principle of correspondence allow a man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. As the masters wrote long ago, as above, so below, and as below, so above. 3. The principle of vibration. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, and nothing is at rest. This is a fact that modern science has confirmed, but was spoken as truth more than 1,000 years ago by the Hermetic masters. This principle explains the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit, resulting all largely from varying rates of vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position on the scale. From the all to the grossest form of dense matter, all is in a constant state of vibration. The vibration of spirit being at such an intense rate of infinite vibration that it appears to be at rest. just as the rapidly spinning wheel looks motionless. And at the end of the scale, on the other side, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low they also seem to be at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from electron to molecule to galaxy to universe, even the planes of energy and forces as well as the mental planes. An understanding of this principle, in tandem with various formulas, will allow the student to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others, including the vibrations of the natural phenomena in various ways. The old masters wrote long ago, "He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power." 4. The principle of polarity. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual, everything has two poles, and that everything has its pair of opposites. It explains the old paradoxes which have been stated as such. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree. Or, everything is and isn't at the same time. And, the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, as well as the common phrase, there are two sides to every coin. This is to say that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that these opposites are really only the two extremes of the very same thing, the differences consisting merely of degrees. Look at a mercury thermometer and tell me where the so-called heat ends and the cold begins. There's no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms, heat and cold, simply indicate varying degrees of a rate of vibration. The phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. How about light and darkness? These are the same thing, with the only difference being varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What about large and small, or sharp and dull, high and low, noise and quiet, positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Take the extreme example of hate and love. These two mental states seem completely different, yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, which come to a middle point that we describe as like or dislike. These shade so gradually into each other that we may be at a loss to describe exactly if we like or dislike, or neither. All are but degrees of the same thing. More importantly, these vibrations of love or hate can be changed in one's mind as well as in others. This can be accomplished via an exercise of the will, with a bit of finesse and some luck. Good and evil, as well, are just poles of the same thing, and the masters understand the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes the phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of this principle will allow the student to change his own polarity as well as that of others, if only he take the time to study and perfect the art. These old Hermetic masters wrote long ago, "Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled." 5. The principle of rhythm. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is a manifested and measured motion to and fro, an infill and an exfill, a high tide and a low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance within the principle of polarity. There is always action and reaction, advance and a retreat, a rise and then a fall, and then a rise again. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is in manifest with the creation and destruction of worlds and stars, as well as the rise and fall of nations. It applies to the life of all things, as well as to the mental states of man. Of course, this mental state being the most important to the old masters. The learned Hermetic masters used the understanding of this principle of rhythm to overcome the effects. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease in operation, but they have learned to escape its effects to a certain degree by mastering the principle, and therefore to use it instead of being used by it. The master polarizes himself at the point in which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to some extent, be it more or less unconsciously. The master, however, does this consciously, and by the use of his will. He attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible on belief of the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the masters, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, as well as using them form an important part of the Hermetic alchemy. As the masters wrote long ago, everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. 6. The principle of cause and effect. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect and an effect for every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law and that nothing ever merely just happens. There is no such thing as chance. While there are various planes of cause and effect, with the higher dominating the lower, still nothing escapes the law entirely. The masters understand the art and methods of rising to a higher plane of causality, and therefore by which becoming causers instead of the affected, while the hordes of barbarians are carried along, obedient to their environments, the wills and desires of those stronger than themselves, the predisposition of their genes, suggestion, propaganda. They move about like pawns on the chessboard of life. The masters, understanding the principles and thus the laws of cause and effect, can therefore rise to planes above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as their environment, to become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life, rather than be played and moved about by other wills and environments. This same principle applies to the physical laws of matter and how force can carry electricity through a maze of circuitry, or fresh water through aqueducts, by understanding the various causes of flows and the effects of our inputs. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but help to rule that on their own plane. In this statement there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him with the ears to hear, hear. For the wise masters speak thus: every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. 7. The principle of gender. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything. The masculine and feminine principles are ever at work. This is true not just of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual. On the plane of physicality, we all obviously have a sex. But on the higher planes, this takes other forms. No creation, be it physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements, or genders. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains the male. The alchemical wedding is the union of the masculine and feminine principles. It can be understood as the feminine principle of love and the masculine principle of action. Love without action is what? Is purposeless? Is nothing. It doesn't exist. It doesn't create. Likewise, action without love is destruction, evil, and domination. They require each other to create positively. This principle can be seen in the many languages and in religion, as well as symbolically in the form of the blade and the chalice. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle of gender, as it contains the solutions of many mysteries of life. A word of caution to the listeners that this principle has no reference to many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles and are nothing but a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infinite form of phallicism tend to ruin the mind, body, and soul. The Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend towards lust and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek further instruction in such teachings, you must go elsewhere. The Hermetic teachings contain nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all is pure, and to the base, all is base. It is as the wise and old Hermetic masters wrote long ago. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. As you can see, these principles are just as true today as they were thousands of years ago. These teachings are not just the fanciful, philosophic musings from a simpler time. They very much apply to the everyday life of everyone. The practice and mastery of the Hermetic teachings is a practice and mastery of the skill of alchemy. Alchemy being the name of the thin veil that the philosophers used to conceal themselves from prosecution by the Church for heresy. This Hermetic alchemy is the skill of taking the man of base, lead, or beast consciousness, and through vigorous study and practice to transmute oneself or others into the mental state of golden awareness, as well as to master the laws and principles of the physical world. Take, for instance, the first principle, the principle of mentalism. The all is in all, and the all is mind. The universe is mental. On its face, many of the materialistic persuasion will throw this wisdom away as useless. The skilled Hermetic alchemist will understand the power that this truth contains. You better believe as well that the likes of Edward Bernays, those of Wellington House, and the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations have a complete mastery over this principle. They have mastered the art of control and influence of the physical world by understanding that it's all a production of the mind, and have therefore prioritized the infatuation of the common man with ideals and principles that serve to further their own interests rather than his, to create the world that they wish. All acts of war are a product of the psychological manipulations of entire populations, with the skillful delivery of propaganda to shape the minds and therefore by which shape the actions of the beasts of the field. All acts of advertisement by the major corporations are alchemical actions by which the masters of the principles of mentalism are influencing the actions of the hylix into the support and fulfillment of the bank accounts of the masters of said principle. Now, this is not to say that one must or can only use these principles for evil or negative manipulations of others. That's just what has been the most popular use of them in the common age, or the modern age. Remember the principles of polarity and rhythm. To use the principle of mentalism is to transmute the student's own mind into ways of thinking that will create positive action and influences in the life of the practitioner, and the practitioner goes by the same techniques. The goal of Hermetic philosophy and Hermetic alchemy is the positive mental transmutation of the student by way of mastery over the several principles of Hermeticism. The goal of this transmutation is to bring more positivity to the world by the future actions taken by the student who is now at a higher level of mental vibration and able to use the principles of gender, cause and effect, and the like to create something beautiful for us all to enjoy. As the Hermetic masters teach, mind, and therefore elements and metals, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art.